Welcome back to Babes in Bookland, your women's memoir podcast. I'm your host, Alex Franca, and author Danilyn Rutherford is here to discuss her memoir, Beautiful Mystery: Living in a Worldless World. Hello, Danilyn. I am so happy to have you on the show today.
Oh, I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Your memoir was informative, honest, and I thoroughly enjoyed learning about your daughter, Millie. Your love and acceptance of her poured from the pages, and you didn't shy away from sharing difficult feelings or experiences as you navigated solo parenting after the death of your husband against a world who doesn't place much value on your daughter's life. I think we have to be honest about that. You
Mm,
came face to face with your own expectations of life and motherhood and your own internalized biases. And now, through your memoir, you fight and advocate for your daughter, for her worth, for her voice, for her happiness, for her services to support her. Let's get into it.
great.
You have your doctorate in anthropology. What exactly is anthropology?
When you ask anthropologists that question, we always blanch. It's like a little bit like the Supreme Court justice who's like, what is pornography? I know it when I see it. But anthropology literally means the study of people.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of disciplines study people, psychology, for example. I think the difference is anthropology studies people in their complexity and singularity and diversity and in the way that they're embodied in the world too. So within the American version of the discipline, we have biological anthropology, which studies what it is to be an embodied human being. It studies, human evolution, archaeology, which studies people in time, and then cultural anthropology, which studies, people in their own unfolding histories. I mean, my own work is both historical and ethnographic and deals with a lot of different things. So maybe the best way to describe it is, if you had a psychologist who was doing a study, they might pick out like 300 undergraduates at their university and have them do surveys, right? And then they would make assumptions about what human beings are all about and what makes them tick. If we were going to study 300 undergraduates at universities, we'd tell you what 300 undergraduates at universities are like and
That's
all
right.
of the sources that go into making them tick. So, we're really kind of about the story, about the history, about the singularity of people. So when we make claims about, what makes us human, it's always with a certain modesty and looking more for echoes between places rather than, strict laws. So
Yeah.
that's that's the wrap I prepared for today. It might be different on a different day, but like I said.
I loved it. What got you interested in this field?
An accident, totally by accident. I mean, I think, when you think about how you end up doing something, it's always easy to make up a story. So it's like, yeah, when I was 5, my goal in life was to write novels from the perspective of my cat. And the other thing I like to do was look at atlases and chart sea routes to any part of the world. But yeah, then I was interested in science. I was just kind of interested in everything. I studied both biology and history as an undergraduate, but I also took some time off. I just had this adventurous streak and, rode my bike through Europe, ended up staying in France, being a nanny for a family in Paris. After I finished school, I knew I just wanted to live outside the US again. And so I went to Central Java and taught English for 2 years. Came back, worked for a little nonprofit that made small grants, but kind of wanted to get back to Indonesia.
Hmm.
Love living with people, love learning about their lives. And that seemed like, a way to do it was to go to graduate school. And I only applied to one anthropology program at Cornell because there were people there who knew a lot about Indonesia, which is where I wanted to go. And
Wow.
just kind of like stumbled into anthropology. I had never taken any anthropology when I started my PhD.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the irony is, I kind of have ended up an anthropologist,
Well, Danilyn, I would read that memoir as well. So, just putting that out there.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It seems like you were just led by love and by your passions, and you gave yourself permission to trust that life
Yeah.
will work out a certain way, whatever that way is.
Yeah. It's kind of generational. I mean, I was kind of like the wannabe hippie generation, and I had this real kind of idea that life is about adventure. It's not about career or profession, so I just really ended up kind of following my passions, right?
Yeah.
And And I think that's often how things unfold. As much as you think you're going to have a really specific kind of route through life, it often doesn't work out that way. So, in a sense, accepting invitations, embracing what comes your way is often the best way to kind of find your way in life, I think.
Yeah, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sitting down and realizing that you wanted to write this memoir, Beautiful Mystery, about your daughter.
Yeah. So I kind of had this idea I wanted to write about Millie when she was little and first kind of going into early intervention and doing therapy. And I was just kind of coming to terms with the fact that, she wasn't like hitting milestones. And just to back up, I was a reluctant mother,
Mm.
with my husband Craig. I'm like, okay, I'll have kids. He loved kids. He really wanted kids. I'll have kids. You have to do half the work,
Uh-huh.
And then the
Yeah.
other side is like, I don't really know how this is not going to come naturally to me. I have to buy the guidebook. So I had like the what to expect books
Mm-hmm.
on my shelf. And it's like, I thought, oh, I'll write a book called What Not to Expect, But then I kind of put away that idea. And it wasn't until I moved to Santa Cruz that I really started writing about Millie. And I joined a writing practice class with a teacher, Laura Davis. She's a student of Natalie Goldberg, who wrote this book, Writing Down the Bones. And writing practice is great because it's basically have a prompt. The rules are you just have to keep writing. First thought, best thought, be concrete, be specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing these classes and just generating a lot of material about Millie and my life with her. And then she started sneaking into academic papers I was writing, and even when she was tiny, I would teach theory courses and I couldn't help but talk about my daughter because it's like,
Yeah.
I'm teaching all this stuff about what it is to be a human being. And then I'm like, well, and then there's Millie, so I couldn't help but want to talk about her. And so I had a set of essays. I had some more memoiristic writing, and I had just finished my third academic book. And I'm like, yeah, I just want to try to turn this into a book. So I didn't really know what kind of book it was.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I thought it was an academic book with some personal writing woven through it. And then I thought it was a memoir with some academic thinking woven through it. It really kind of was a process figuring out that it was going to be the book it is, which is somewhere in the blur between those two things.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say it's a memoir with some academic writing, but you make it accessible, which I appreciate because I am not an anthropologist, but you lay it out so smoothly. Here's what the history of this is. Here's what we need to be doing better. And here's why it
Yeah,
matters, because here's my daughter.
exactly. And that was hard work.
Yeah.
It's not easy for academics to write in ways that are accessible. We're really not taught to do it. So,
Well, you
yeah,
did it, so that's good for
yeah,
you. Good
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
Okay, so you went to this writing practice. Did
Mhm.
you have any rituals that you discovered? Were there
Yeah.
anything, ways that you were able to sort of switch your brain into a different mode?
Yeah, I mean, writing practice is great. It is a ritual in and of itself, because you have really strict boundaries about it, and you're also doing it with other people. So it's the way it works is everyone writes to a prompt for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then you read aloud what you wrote.
Mm,
And in those classes, the only thing that you're allowed to say is thank you, right? It's not about being evaluated. It's just about the process of writing, which
yeah.
I think for me is just really important. Now, later I joined a feedback class where people were very much allowed to say things other than thank you. But yeah, I think the ritual for me is I really had to set aside, times in the day. Like, I'm a really early riser. I'm very athletic. I get up, I work out every morning. I'm pretty disciplined. And then it's just like that first hour at the computer.
Hmm.
I'd be working on my own stuff. And then weekends, right? I work for a foundation now. Most of my career was as a professor, but now I have what's much more of a day job. So I have weekends a little bit more free. And that would just be my time, and just learning to really take pleasure in it,
Hmm.
was great. Also just writing with other people, for my feedback class, it was like 1,600 words a week. So it's like I always knew I was going to write 1,600 words, going to make it as good as I possibly could to share with my classmates. And that really, I think, was an important part of the ritual. And then moving away from the place where you do your regular work. I mean, I'm just on my computer all day. That's pretty much my job. I'm writing all day. I write emails, I write reports, I write all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
That was also part of the ritual. And I guess the other thing to say is just how you write. Now, until recently, anything that I was going to write that was going to be sort of like a memoir or a form of of writing where I really cared about how it came out, I would write by hand, and
Wow.
yeah, that most of my career I've done that. I've only recently transitioned to writing kind of first drafts of essays and stuff on the computer, which is making my life a lot easier.
Mm.
It got to a point where
And
I
less
couldn't read my own
crampy.
writing,
Yeah.
so I couldn't do it. Yeah. But yeah, I think that handwriting, that sort of embodied side of writing historically has been an important part of my practice, my ritual.
Are you able to slow your brain down? Because I feel like that's my problem when I handwrite. I just feel like my brain was either moving too fast or my hand would start cramping and then I couldn't understand what I was
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It totally got that way. I think the problem for me, and again, this is like this weird generational thing. Like I wrote papers on a electric typewriter, and that was like a big
Uh-huh.
technology.
Right.
White out, all that
That's
stuff,
true. You had
right?
to be more thoughtful about what
You
you put
had
on
to
the
like have a
page.
draft
Yeah.
and yeah, and so when I got a computer, it was kind of like typing into a computer was like already editing, which meant I couldn't move through the thought, right? I'm kind of
Oh,
someone who stores stuff up and then I just sit down and I blurt out the whole thing. Whatever I've decided the chunk of stuff is going to be, I want to write the whole thing in a sitting. And when I was trying to do that, just first draft on a computer, I'd just be circling back around the same paragraph for like an hour, right? So
yeah.
I think what's happened is in my job right now, I just spend so much time writing emails, etc. I've gotten so I kind of can type thoughtlessly. I just can dump, whereas it used to be I was just always really critical of myself as I was typing.
Sure.
This will all be gone very soon. It'll be like, it's like someone talking about back when we had quills, we had to spend a lot of time sharpening them and finding the right size feather,
But I think it's
right?
so great
It's
for
like,
you to know if someone out there is trying to write their memoir, trying to write anything. Okay, if typing on a computer isn't working for you, sit down, try to write it out by hand. Maybe that will
yeah,
unlock something differently.
yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true, and I mean for me in college, like sometimes I would really have trouble getting started, not quite writing block, but writing anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I just have to be wandering around campus, I'm walking to the library, and then some words will come into my head. I would just sit down on a bench and then just write a draft of a paper. It's
Yeah.
like pencil and paper were really kind of helpful in that way, that I
Yeah.
think sitting at a computer or a typewriter just felt too formal.
Right. Maybe there's too much pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of writing is also living,
Yeah.
experiencing, working through thoughts. But then for me, I always have to have my phone or a piece of paper nearby, but my phone,
Yeah.
and I'll send myself
Yeah.
text messages. That's my pencil and paper. You should read this
Yeah.
text
Yeah.
message that
Yeah.
I did myself, Danilyn. It is bizarre. Sometimes I'm
No,
like,
that's
what
hilarious.
was I thinking? Who knows? Who cares? It's fine.
No, that's kind of been my bridge. I like started using notes. I'm like, okay, this is hard to do, so you can't edit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Also, talk to text has become a good friend because then I really can just
Oh
word
my God.
vomit.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
wow. That sounds dangerous for me. I go on, as you've seen.
Okay, so you talked about writing anxiety. Did you ever have any
Yeah.
moments of writer's block or not really?
In this book, not really. I mean, there were moments of confusion,
Mm,
right? Unlike the other books I've written, I think I'm a fairly okay academic writer. Like I try to write quite clearly. And I've generally had a pretty good vision of what a book is. And my thinking is always like in circles, like each chapter is kind of its own little essay.
hmm.
And I mean, you've read Beautiful Mystery, you've seen this. The middle chapters are kind of, that's my practice. It's like a little circle, a
Yeah.
little self-contained thing. But writing a story, oh my God, that's hard. Like something where each chapter is building on the other and seeing what's missing. So it wasn't so much a block, it was more like just moments of thrashing around, trying to figure out how to do it. I mean, in the past, I did when I was trying to write my dissertation, I had like a year of writer's block where I just couldn't get started. I had too much to say, which made me feel like I didn't have enough to say. And it
Mm,
wasn't until I just thought of a good first sentence of a chapter that I was able to start.
yeah.
So I've experienced writer's block, but I think one of the beauties as you kind of spend more decades in doing this kind of work is you just get kind of shameless. It's
Yeah.
like the sort of anxiety that I think I felt as someone in my 30s. You kind of shed that when you get into your 60s. And I think that's been really helpful, in terms of that kind of fear that could be so paralyzing in the past.
I think for me, when you come to understand that there is value in all aspects of the journey, even parts
Yeah.
that maybe don't feel like they will be a part of your final paper. I had another author that I chatted with. She threw out her entire manuscript.
Yeah.
That's so hard and scary to do, but
Yeah.
she needed to do that to get to the next point. And
Yeah.
then now she has a memoir published.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that there's value in the trash if it becomes trash.
Absolutely. And that's really part of maturing as a writer. And it's also has to do with self-confidence. It's like, okay, I wrote some beautiful sentences, some beautiful paragraphs, and I'm going to say goodbye to them. But there are more beautiful sentences and paragraphs, maybe, where
Yes,
that came
yes,
from. That
yes.
kind of like faith in the future.
Hmm.
Again, it's just the more experience you have, the easier it is to do that, which is the best advice if people want to write is just start writing.
Right. It's like
Happy
anything in
writing is
life.
part of the process. Just start
Yes. The
writing.
more
Yeah.
you do it, the more you grow comfortable with it, the more that you'll just start to criticize yourself less and let it
Yeah.
flow. Let it flow.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so tell me about the moment when you finished your first draft. Did you celebrate?
Well, this is a rough question because, it was like sort of cobbling things together. So I
Yeah.
didn't really feel like there was a finishing to it. I
Okay.
think that the moment of triumph, if there was a moment of triumph, was when I figured out what the prologue would be
Mm.
and what the epilogue would be. And those were pieces I wrote separately. I wrote the prologue in a different kind of writing group, something called Field Studio, run by Nomi Stone and her partner, Rose Skelton, an anthropologist and poet and a journalist and creative nonfiction writer
Oh, wow.
who are working with academics to help them write more lively, engaging academic prose. So that was where I wrote the kind of prologue about the monk parakeets,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That
Right.
was
But sort of
beautiful.
figuring out like that other piece, I thought that was going to be the beginning. I thought the end was going to be the beginning, the epilogue. It's when I figured out that this is one beat and this is the other, and the birds will fly through everything in
Hmm.
their way.
Hmm.
It's like figuring that out. That felt kind of like a moment of triumph. It's like, okay, I've got it. I guess the other moment of triumph was, I had a lot of help writing this book. I worked with a couple of different developmental editors. I had delusions of grandeur. I thought I was going to market it to a trade press book, to trade presses and so on. One of the development editors was like, yeah, you just don't tell the whole story. So it's like the chapter No Future that was missing in the first version, and sort of writing that chapter and kind of putting the last brick in the wall.
Hmm.
That also felt like, okay, now I have something I can work with. But yeah, there were just so many drafts of it, Alex. It's like there wasn't, as soon as I finished one, I knew it's inadequate and I have to go back and do another one, right?
Right. Well,
So,
also, it's your life. How do
yeah,
you simplify it down? How do you do that? How do you pick the moments with Millie? How do you pick what you want to
yeah,
say and it's
yeah,
not an
yeah,
easy feat and you did it. And so, okay, the book is in your hands and you have
yeah,
your publicist sending it out to people like me to read.
yeah, yeah,
How has that been sharing this part of yourself with the world? I mean, this is your
yeah.
heart.
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's funny. I mean, you were asking about like throwing things out. One of the things you learn from this kind of writing is you learn craft, right? Which means you have to be close to the feelings. And, I was working with kind of a bunch of other people who are writing memoirs, and some of them are very close to their feelings. I tend to be not that kind of writer, so it's like what's in there is, kind of as much as I think I could reveal.
Yeah,
But you learn stuff like not everything that happened is interesting, even if it's
sure.
really precious to you. Experiences that are precious to you don't actually belong in a book. And
Yeah.
from going through all of that, it's funny at this point, I'm kind of like, I'm really happy that people are moved by it and find it engaging. I mean, the best thing that people have told me is like, I picked it up and started reading and I couldn't stop. I just read the whole thing, which is not something that happens to books written by anthropologists very frequently at
I could
all.
imagine that. I could imagine that.
So that's actually all of that is making me happy. But
Yeah.
the thing, and it's not really happiness. It's more just like, I don't know, like feeling emotionally taken by the moment in that when I was writing the book, all of this stuff about like how Millie has led me to question the things that we're taught in our society about what it is to be a human being, either explicitly or implicitly. Sometimes I felt like, oh, am I kind of, talking about the Nazis? Am I going overboard? And it's just the stuff that's happened in the world.
Yeah.
Suddenly it just feels really important to have this story out there. And
Hmm.
so, like the publicity thing, I have two reactions. Part of me is like, oh, this is kind of unseemly. It's like self-promotion. That's not really my thing.
Yeah.
And then my other thought is, what is it doesn't work? So it's sort of like, I think like I'm feeding a certain part of my ego I'm not really happy to be feeding.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I think about the fact that for better or worse, this is a very timely story,
Hmm.
that makes me feel a little bit better about, just trying to bring it to as many people as I can.
1,000%. I'm in the same boat as you. I think what my podcast is this beautiful place for women's stories and voices to be heard and amplified. But I hate Instagram. I hate self-promotion. But I get to do it because I love you guys so much. So at least I'm sort of
Yeah,
hiding behind y'all. I'm not like,
yeah. No, it's really anyway. And then it's like you hate it, but then you're like, oh, this is fun.
right? You're like,
It's
wait, but
just
I'm not supposed to be this
such
type of
ambivalence.
person. Yes.
The definition of ambivalence. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah.
Okay, how did you find the title?
Oh God. So that is a great story. So I got an NSF Scholars Award when I was first thinking like, okay, Millie is a book. I didn't know what kind of book, but Millie is a book. And it was a award that allowed me to do some cross training and psychology and, kind of language development and do some interviews with other families, et cetera. Just a little bit, anthropology
Hmm.
things. And when I wrote the proposal for that, I got a title and I'm very title driven. Like before I write an essay, I have to have the title.
Yeah, it's like the
Write a
key that
book,
unlocks it.
the key that
I'm the
unlocks it,
same.
the introduction, I have to
Yes.
explain the title. The other side of signs was my title. It's like, it's a much more academic kind of title.
Hmm.
What is a sign? How do we come to understand each other through symbols and signs? And what's the other side of it instead of just conventions, right? So, yeah, that was my title whole way through. And then I, ended up going with Duke University Press, and Ken Wissaker, who was my editor, is like, that's not your title. It's like the marketing people will not buy that.
Right. Right.
You need to come up with another title. And then it was like, a week of struggle. I
Pounding your
was
head
driving
against the
home.
wall. Yeah.
Like my husband, who's a fiction writer, and I are like, how about this? He sent it to Ken. He's like, no, that's not the title.
You're
Not the
like,
title.
Ken, can you come up with a title?
No.
Ken.
And then I come up with titles like, oh, there are 3 books and 4 movies with this title. But then it just came to me, I think the point, and I'm so glad it's the title now because I feel like it really gets at something that's really distinctive about this book and really important about the ethics behind the book, which is this idea that you don't have to understand someone to love them, right? And
Yeah.
accept them and make them part of your world. And I think that's just a really important message. So I'm glad I finally hit upon it.
Hmm.
And beautiful is probably the word I use most in the book anyway. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, yeah, that's how I ended up finding it.
No, it's a great pairing. And there's a visceral reaction to beautiful mystery. You're kind of like,
Mhm.
what is the beautiful mystery? What am I going to learn
Yeah,
here? What's
right.
yeah, it evokes a feeling in you and it makes you want to pick up the book, which is what the title should do. And then also the cover, which is
Yeah,
maybe with memoirs, it is a little different because it's more personal, but usually cover designs, you don't have any say. But I'm thinking
yeah.
you had to have a say with this because this is a photo of you.
Yeah, in academic books, we kind of get away with having a little bit more of a say, I've written 3 books about West Papua, which is the, occupied part of Indonesia where I've done research and I was able to kind of make some suggestions around that. Academic presses are very different from trade presses,
Okay.
right? They
Yeah.
have a different kind of mission in the world. But Duke, if you look at their catalog, Duke is very spiffy. They have great book design. design. They have great book artists. I think the book just turned out really beautifully.
Hmm.
So, yeah, a suggestion. I have this just very beautiful picture of me and Millie
Yeah.
standing together on a deck. We were actually visiting Hawaii with some friends. My personal website has it because I love the picture so much. And so that was the picture I gave to them. And then there was a long discussion with Ken again about whether or not it would work. You know?
But it's great though because your face is shadowed, but and you can see
Yeah.
Millie. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was it. It's just Millie is just luminous in this picture, and
Hmm.
she's just generally luminous. My daughter is really luminous.
And
And
you can tell. You can tell from your
yeah,
book. Yeah, she's
yeah,
a
yeah,
light.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. I was a little bit like the colors. I like this looks like an Easter egg. I was a little unsure about the colors, but they've grown on me. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's all good. It really is. It's
yeah,
beautiful. Let's learn more about your light, Millie. Tell me about her coming into your world and
yeah,
then discovering that, like you said, she wasn't hitting her milestones and just that whole experience of
yeah.
recognizing that life was going to look a little differently than maybe you had expected it to look.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one thing that's important is that Millie's my second child. My son Ralph was born while I was living in London and applying for academic jobs. And like I said, I was a reluctant mother. I'm like, okay, Craig, I'll do this. And I was bowled away by how into my baby I was.
Mm, yep.
It's like maybe it's not everybody's baby, but my baby I was really into. And I
Yeah.
was really into being his mom. And Ralph just had this personality like from the minute he was born. He was just clearly this person, right?
Hmm.
And I look at him today, he's still that person. It's just that sort of spark, right? So Millie, well, Ralph was born like when I was finishing my dissertation. Millie was born when I was finishing the draft of my first book. And it just I kind of noticed something from the very beginning, right? And I kind of write about this book, and some of it's a little bit like a little woo-woo. It's just the setting of how she was born.
Hmm.
And just my level of consciousness around her birth was just really different than with Ralph. And then bringing her home and just like that kind of spark, like that I saw in Ralph, like that kind of reaching out for the world, it was just really hard to connect with Millie.
Hmm.
So early on, I kind of had this weird feeling. And I was also like really chugging, like, okay, book done, coming up for my first review, very career driven, career anxious, all of that.
Yeah.
A little bit distracted. But then just when I would really look at her, it's kind of like, okay, well, she's not really making eye contact.
Yeah.
Should she be doing that? I mean, babies, typically developing babies, are incredible flirts, right? If you
It's
spent time
true.
on an airplane with a baby, they're flirts, right?
Yeah.
My daughter was just kind of self-contained.
Hmm.
Also, would just get upset for really mysterious reasons.
Hmm.
And like all of the things that you think of to do to calm a baby would not calm her. So I had all this stuff going on in my head,
Yeah.
and I write in the book about like reading the different milestones and like, okay, I'm going to try to get her to sit up on her own,
Right.
and telling myself she was okay.
Yeah.
But then finally, she developed an eye turn. And I think Craig and I were each having our own sort of process, the same thoughts, and kind of came together and started sharing them and went to a pediatrician who was like, babies develop at different rates.
Right.
There's probably nothing wrong with her. Bring her back in a month. And by that point, it was just really clear, not just that her eye turn was getting worse, but that her muscle tone was ridiculously low. So it's not an accident. She wasn't rolling or sitting up. It's like she didn't have the muscle tone or muscle coordination to do all those things.
Hmm.
So that sort of started us down this road. And, again, I write about this scene in the book, like going to a neurologist and this sort of faith, like you just find the right expert and they tell you exactly what's going on with your kid. And
Right.
my life with Millie has been an education in the fact that no one knows exactly what's going on with my kid,
Right. She's never
right?
been diagnosed with any specific
Never been
genetic condition.
diagnosed
Yeah.
with anything. It was my 40th birthday. We're going to Wisconsin to see my parents. We go to the neurologist in the morning, and it's like he doesn't give us answers, but he definitely gives us the impression this is not just some passing thing, right? That
Yeah.
there is something going on here, and this is really going to change, kind of your life with your kid. I mean, I think I had a lot of pretty selfish thoughts regrets in the beginning, I'll
Sure.
own them. Again, I was so anxious about my career. I had such a vision in my mind of what my life would be like. It was like, yeah, you have kids and then they grow up and they're independent and then you go back and do like a year of field work. I mean, I'm an anthropologist, right? You go and live someplace for a year,
Yeah.
right? I had all of these ideas about stuff we do. Craig was a management consultant. That's what happened to my bearded Marxist, unfortunately. But I had this faith he would go back to being a bearded Marxist. We lived like church mice. We saved a lot of money. He's like, I'm going to retire at 40. And it's like, yeah, great. I just had this vision of hiking in the Sierras with our children and all of this stuff. And I had trouble letting that go.
Yeah.
It was really that sort of change in tracks, was pretty hard to come to terms with. And I think my reaction in the early period was just to take all of the therapy at its word, like super seriously, like we are going to help her catch up. She's delayed. Like I said, I'm an athlete,
Yeah.
run harder, right?
Right.
And we will help her catch up, right? So that was, yeah. And what does it mean for my career, like,
Yeah.
so there was just, yeah, it was a lot. It was definitely a lot.
I read and did an episode on Heather Lanier's Raising a Rare Girl. Her
Mhm.
daughter was diagnosed with a genetic condition, but she writes about being made to feel like she did something wrong. She had one doctor say it's either a bad seed or bad soil.
Jesus.
Oh, I
What a thing to
know.
say. Again, because I didn't really have that much of my ego tied up in the idea of being a mother, it wasn't kind of like, I'm a bad mother. It was more like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know, like, how am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do? I mean,
Yeah.
fortunately, I'm making this sound really bad. I mean, during those early years, I also had like Craig beside me, and
Yeah.
he is a great, great dad and really kind of approached it like, okay, just need to find out everything we can. What
Hmm.
do we need to do? Very even keeled, loved his kids, would always love his kids. So I also felt like, okay, I have this partner, even if this is hard for me, it's not like I ever thought I was going to be the starlet of the mothers group anyway, you know. But yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a thing. And again, it has to do with your generation. I think my generation of moms, we were just moving into the moms raise super children kind of phase of the world,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And my son's a fantastic human being, but this was an issue with him as well. It's like my kids
Yeah.
are their own people. They're not hothouse flowers. And so
Yeah.
relating to parents who are raising hothouse flowers has always been difficult for me.
Yeah. Well, how was it navigating, juggling Millie's lack of diagnosis, but treatments
Yeah.
and therapies while also having a toddler? I mean, I've got a
Yeah.
7 and a 3-year-old right now.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's really interesting, these questions, because it's like from this perspective, it's like, I just did it.
You just did
And
it.
and it
Yeah.
was like, this is how I don't want to know how to do. But like Millie was just this, I look back at like, home videos of her. She was this just really sweet little thing. She did kind of wake up. She did start smiling, but she was like, you put her down and she kind of stays where she is.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
like I'm gonna crawl off and like electrocute myself, like many
That's
toddlers
helpful.
her age,
Yeah.
you
True.
know. And Ralph was just super verbal, just this talkative little thing, and really into his dad, and his dad was really into him. So part of that early phase was just like Craig taking Ralph off for adventures. The two of them went on a skiing trip in Colorado. They'd go on bike rides. They just
Wow.
Craig, in kind of a fit of craziness, took up hunting when he turned 40, you know? So it's like,
That's a
like a
decision.
vegan, right? So it's like you take Ralph off and they'd sneak away and carry her on dead birds. So it's Ralph had this other sort of world with his father,
Hmm.
so it's just a really different kind of thing, right? Like Millie's needs in some ways are really limiting for
Hmm.
families. Like you can't just get out of the house in 3 seconds. It's like not like everybody's walking, you just walk out the front door and down the stairs. It was like always an operation,
Sure.
with mobility issues because the world is not set up for people with mobility issues.
Right.
But then the other side of it is there's a lot of psychodrama involved when you have two talking children
Oh
that
yeah.
I didn't have to deal with and Ralph didn't have to deal with. I mean, I think about this, sometimes I joke about this with Ralph. It's like if you had had like a typically developing sister, it would have been really hard on you. It's like really good thing you had Millie. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get to losing Craig.
Yeah.
How old was Millie? How old was Ralph?
Yeah. So Millie turned 3 in August, and Craig died around Thanksgiving in November. So she
Hmm.
was a bit over 3, and Ralph was going on 7. His
Hmm.
birthday's in January. So yeah, they were young, 3 and 6.
And your world shifted overnight. That was a beautifully written passage, by the way. That was heartbreaking, but it was beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really therapeutic to do that writing, I have
Yeah.
to say, because when you have a thing like that happen, the stuff they say about flashbulb memory, a traumatic experience gives you the kind of memory where every detail just remains vivid.
Hmm.
Right. I'm carrying around like those moments in my life, and I will for the rest of my life. They're just incredibly vivid. And the feelings. I mean, there may be things in the details of what happened in the weeks afterwards, but I really, really remember kind of how I felt, right? And to be able to try to put that on paper without it being like maudlin, you know,
Sure. Yeah, of
right? Or
course.
sentimental, or just to actually really express what was going on.
Yeah.
That felt really good. I mean, I think in part, one of the feelings I had at the time was just, it was like, I mean, you're an actor, right? It was like stepping out of one script into another, without any rehearsal.
That's
It's
a
like,
great way to
what?
put it. Hmm.
It just, the world just completely changed, right?
Yeah.
And then being around people, I mean, two things, just the enormous generosity of people, right?
Mm.
If you haven't experienced something like this, you haven't experienced the full capacity of human beings, even ones who don't know each other that well or whose fates are not that tied up in one another, to just come forward and hold each other up. I mean, that was an amazing realization. Again, I'm not a super sentimental person. It's like I'm trying not to do like a Hallmark card, but I will never forget colleagues who called me up out of the blue that day, and were willing to sort of enter into this space with me. It was really incredible. The other side, though, was I felt like, kind of like with motherhood, like there's a script I'm supposed to be following, and that's not really, I can't really follow it. Like, I like the whole thing of, I think people expect me to burst into tears and run off into a dark room and stay there for the next 3 months. And it's like, that's not the way I responded. The way I responded was, what now? It was like, okay, in the absence of any guideposts, like, okay, I'll make a list. Surely there are some tasks that I can throw myself into. And that's kind of what I was doing. So it was a very weird period, you know?
Yeah.
And again, like I said, I think that there are scripts and maybe there are commonalities with the way that people deal with this kind of an event in their life. But one of my main feelings is like, I'm just not doing this right?
Yeah.
Which was very, yeah, balanced by, I'm so grateful for people who don't seem to care. They're still being really nice to me, you know. Yeah.
We should all reflect on like what our expectations of grief are from ourselves, from the people around us. Like
Yeah.
why does it have to look any certain way? As
Right.
long as you actually are allowing yourself to grieve, because I think there is the flip side of that where
Yes.
do we
Yes.
even feel
Yes.
comfortable allowing ourselves to grieve? And you're
Yes.
a mother of two, a daughter who needed to stay consistent with a certain way that her life was going at this point.
Yes.
I mean, you did
Yes.
just have responsibilities. You weren't able to be
Yeah.
the wilting flower. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did. I think I found my ways to do it. I mean, a couple of things were lessons to me that I've tried to carry forward when people around me have experienced this kind of loss. And one of them is I really wanted to talk about Craig.
Mm.
I really wanted to talk about him and, continue to talk about him to his son, right? I just really wanted to share who he was, and that was really, really important to me. And I needed really time alone, right? So it's sort of like I cried, but I cried in the car by myself.
Yeah.
I also really needed to do stuff that was just being in the moment, being in the process. So, I took a watercolor class. I've done watercolor since I was a teenager, but really like prioritize threw myself into it. I went through all of our pictures. I did a bunch of like the domestic stuff that he did. He was like this incredible partner. He made most of the money. He cooked, he shopped, he did the finances. It's like I was kind of ornamental, so I through my, well, what? Craig bought all of these albums and hadn't put pictures into them. I just put pictures in albums. I did a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff like that. And then I was with my children doing domestic things. And that was also, it was elegaic in this kind of
Mm.
really, sort of moving way, right? So, yeah, my forms of grief were not maybe what people expected, but they were there. And then at the end of the year, I needed to go into therapy because
Yeah.
the other side of it. And I think that's something that's really, beautiful in Joan Didion's book about losing, her
Ugh,
husband and then her
the year of
daughter.
magical thinking. Mm.
Yeah, it's just like you really think the person is going to come back. And that's,
Yeah.
the process is just unfolding. It's constantly learning that they're not coming back.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to be,
No, I mean these are the parts of the conversations that I love because
Yeah.
this is the stuff that people can resonate with. They may not be able to resonate with your motherhood journey, but they can
Yeah.
still resonate with so many parts of your life. It was heartbreaking when you wrote about how it hurt you so much that your daughter wouldn't remember Craig.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. And, I think I captured this okay in the chapter on, Craig's death. It's like all of this stuff that was just completely surreal was happening. And I'm like with Ralph, and I'm worried Ralph witnessed his father dying. It's like I'm with my
Yeah.
kid, and thinking about him having a chance to say goodbye, all of that stuff. And then for Millie, Millie was just there with her caregiver, right?
Yeah.
And then realizing it's like, oh my God, Millie. I had not been thinking about her in the throes of it. And then I started thinking about her. And it's just really sad, It just
Mhm.
made me really sad. Like how, I can talk about Craig to Ralph and I have nonstop. He's 28. We still talk about his dad, but with Millie, how was I going to keep her dad alive? He was so important in her life, right? And so, yeah, that was probably the hardest part of the experience is just what does this mean for Millie? And it wasn't just an enormous part of it, which is how am I going to deal with this alone without
Yeah.
this really wise, giving, compassionate partner who's suddenly gone? It
Yeah.
was also like, how do I keep him alive for her? And it's like, will she miss him? Will I know? What will this mean for her? And
Yeah.
like I described, she stopped sleeping, she cried, she went through a period that was rough right after he died. I don't know what that had to do with, but I
Sure.
felt like maybe it was because he was gone. Maybe it was just because things were different and she had the sense of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think about that a lot. My mom died in 2020, and she was one of the people in memory care who got COVID. She had a stroke. We don't know if it was connected to COVID or not, but yeah, that was when she passed away. And my mom was great with Millie. I mean, some of the babies I had to kill to make this into a book were discussions of my mom and my dad, right? And
Mm.
sort of her death just makes me really sad when I think about that in relationship to Millie, right? It's
Yeah.
like Millie has lost her grandmother, and I can't really talk to her about her grandmother, I can't really share stories about it. Then you have to find other ways to keep people alive, I guess.
Yeah. Let's get into life with Millie, you navigating forward, moving forward, and figuring out this new way of communicating or what
Yeah.
communication even means.
Yeah. I mean, this is something, going back and thinking through that period, I just always assumed she would talk someday. We were all worried
Sure.
about her walking. It's like we just took for granted she would talk. And then time went on and she didn't.
Mm.
Right? But then I think something I've written about academically, but I think I'm able to write about it in the way I do because I've experienced it myself. It's like having this strong longing to make a connection with your kids, right?
Yeah.
It's like this being who used to be in my body. I mean, I don't want to be like a biological determinist, but she used to be in my body and now she's
Yeah.
out here, but we have this bond,
Yes.
And her not making eye contact, it's still something. It's like you see her looking out of the corner of her eye at someone, you think she's looking at that person, but if you're that person, she's kind of looking at you, she's kind of not. She uses her peripheral vision,
Hmm.
right? Which makes it really hard to tell if she's paying attention or not.
Mm-hmm.
but then her hand will reach out and she'll like touch your hand or stroke your clothing or pull on your zipper. It's like she knows you're there, but she doesn't indicate it in the ways that we're kind of taught or socialized into accepting and
Yeah.
expecting, right? So
Yeah.
the moments of connection with her, you desire them, so you get curious and you seek them out. And then when
Yeah.
you find them, and you have a moment when she is looking into your eyes and you're both laughing, it's just like it's like a drug.
Oh my
No,
gosh.
it's
I
so
bet.
pleasurable that
Yeah.
you keep trying, and along the
Yeah,
way
you're
you
like,
learn
what
these
can I
other
do?
ways. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is so great, And I think all of us, I mean, she has 6 caregivers now. She just has this really great team of people who are with her. And I think we all have our own ways of connecting with Millie. And
Yeah.
she's taught us to be really curious about other people and just
Hmm.
see these things like the way we move our bodies together, our body language. There's so many things in the ways that people interact that just fly under the radar when we're just focusing on language.
Hmm.
I think Millie is really kind of great in teaching us this. Yeah, and I mean, there's a point in the book. I talk a little bit about, what speech therapy was like for her. And I don't want to cast shade on any of the therapists who've worked with her. This is like super virtuous work, but, there are definitely models of special education, which are all about like, let's make disabled people as much like us as we possibly can. And
Yeah.
you kind of know where that comes from if you think about the history of eugenics and the way that disabled people have been treated who don't act like everybody else. So, you can see that. So a lot of it was like, okay, Millie, let's see if you can consistently make choices between two symbols, a preferred object, a dispreferred object. And it was completely random, and some of
Yeah.
the stuff they did was contingent on her having hand-eye coordination and regular vision, which she doesn't. There's just all sorts of
Right.
craziness. But finally, in her adulthood, we, met up with a speech therapist who was like, I'm just going to watch Millie and look at the way that she's kind of reaching out. And it's
Yeah.
like, wow, she's really creative, And I
Hmm.
love that. It's like instead of a flawed communicator, she's a creative communicator.
Yeah.
What a great idea. I also talk in the book about an important movement, among disabled people and their allies around discovering sort of, creative new sort of non-traditional modalities of communication. And for people who have motor issues, who have sensory issues, this is something controversial, and especially there's psychologists who've kind of made it their career to critique this kind of thing. There are others who are like doing research that's showing that it's valid, right?
Hmm.
People who might present like Millie, actually, if you can find the right modality, are totally capable of language and
Hmm.
of communicating and of writing poetry. I mean, there's a long list of people who have become writers by way of these sorts of new systems of communication. And one of the chapters is about exploring one of them with Millie, right?
Yes.
It's very important. And this is where mystery is really important because I think sometimes as a parent, you may feel this as a typical parent too. It's like everyone assumes you understand your children completely and you're like, hey, I'm just trying to get by. I don't know what the hell's going on.
That's what like I loved about your book so much. We're all flawed communicators. When your friend sighs, you're like, are you mad at me or are you just disappointed that you didn't see a blue bird flying by?
Yeah, it's crazy,
Yeah,
But I think it's very important with people like Millie, for parents in particular who are given so much power over their lives,
right.
basically for all their lives. I'm her medical conservatorship. I had to do that so people at Medicaid will talk to me on the phone. It's like
Hmm.
very important for me to maintain the position that I am curious, doing my best to understand Millie and what she wants and what's in her best interest, but I ultimately cannot know the totality of that. And I hold open the possibility of revision and the possibility of other people understanding her better, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think that's important for all parents. There is an authority of parenthood that can actually be quite dangerous to people. So, especially to disabled people,
Yeah.
all right? Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a is it rigidity or rigidness?
Yeah, rigidity probably, but whatever. Yeah.
There's a rigidity that can really be a hindrance to people
Yeah.
and to children. It's about, like you said, staying curious as opposed to having these rigid expectations. And you portray that so simply and easily in your book. It just feels like, yeah, this is the way we should all be parenting. We should all be living, meeting people where they are, not projecting our own
Yeah.
expectations of whatever.
Right.
And I love that you, like I said, you make it so accessible to us, regardless of if we even are parents, regardless of if we're typical parents or have children in rare bodies or able,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
something for everyone here to learn. At the end of the day, communication goes so much past just verbal talking to one another.
Yes.
And we
Absolutely.
have to be open to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, how do you think being an anthropologist has influenced your parenting in general and
Yeah.
also how you've shown up for Millie?
No, it's so funny. It's like I didn't live life planning to be an anthropologist, but I love being an anthropologist. I really
Yeah.
love our field, which is good because I'm the president of a foundation that supports anthropologists. So
There
it's
you
good
go.
I'm into it.
That is good.
It's also, I mean, there's all sorts of things about my field that no one should be proud of, but I think
Yeah.
where it is now and where it's going and the kinds of curiosity and imagination and commitment, like people are really coming to the point where you just don't go in and like turn people into lab rats and write your dissertation and then get your nice job. It's like you actually need to be in solidarity with the people who make your knowledge possible. All those things I really love about what's happening in anthropology now,
Hmm.
thanks to the great people who are coming into the field. So, yeah, all in favor of being an anthropologist. And it is quite fun being a mom and an anthropologist because we have these like kind of two tracks we're always on. When I introduce the book, I talk about my daughter-in-law, Sophia Lombrelia, has this thing called the dessert stomach that she's taught me about. Like your dinner stomach is full, but your dessert stomach still has room. There's
Oh,
kind of like
I told that
anthropologists.
to my parents all the time growing up. I called it a dessert capsule, so I'm right there with her.
It's like cows, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like anthropologists have anthropology stomachs. It's like we can be in the midst of something that's very engaging personally. We're really immersed in it. And yet we also have this little like side of our brain that's like, oh, isn't this interesting? How does this compare with this? How's this like that? What's the
Yeah.
broader context? So a story that got cut out of the book was like when I was in London and, Ralph was a baby and I'm like, off in the pram. I got stopped by a reporter, with a camera crew on the BBC, and there's like, research just came out showing how much it costs to raise the average baby. What are your
Oh
comments on
gosh.
this? And I talked about capitalism, and I talked
Hmm.
about, the anxiety that, popular culture creates for parents. I just did this whole like kind of anthropology rap. And then I went off and bought a, baby monitor.
Because you need one.
Exactly. So it's like I think we're in situations thinking about them as situations at the same time and kind of toggling back and forth. And again, what I was just talking about is just an emerging idea of the ethics of the field is, yeah, you're toggling back and forth, but you also need to toggle back and recognize that these are real relationships, right? That have
Hmm.
obligations, right? So it's like you're immersed in the lives of the people who make your research possible. And that has lifelong effects, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think being an anthropologist is just like, it makes everything more fun, Alex. In
It
a
sounds
sense.
like it. You did write in your book that your relationship and experience with Millie made you revisit or rethink the things
Yeah.
that the field of anthropology was trying to say was fact almost, maybe.
Right, right, right. I mean, I could go incredibly nerdy on this, but I will try not to. One of the things I love about anthropology is like we're kind of taught to take nothing for granted.
Mm.
That's one of the sort of ethics of our field. Like I said, I was interested in everything. I was really interested in how did stuff get here? How does it work? So physics was my favorite class in high school. It's like
Hmm.
getting down to the roots of things, and
Yeah.
and I studied at Cornell with a very brilliant, somewhat idiosyncratic teacher who was a big follower of the fancy French philosopher Jacques Derrida. I mean, if you ever want to hear people making fun of academic writing, they're always like trotting out Derrida, who I think is a great writer, by the way. I don't abide by any of that, but anyhow, yeah, Jim Siegel. Yeah, and so I knew nothing about anthropology. The first class I took with him had a requirement of reading knowledge of Malay, the colonial language of Indonesia. It was crazy. And then the next class I took with him was called Myth, Ritual, and Sign, and it was just reading a lot of foundational philosophy and social theory around how something like a human subject, a human orientation to the world becomes possible.
Mm.
a lot of that was kind of about how it becomes possible to have a convention. If you think about language, it's a series of conventions. Because of the particularities of where we're born and grown up and the experiences that we have, when I say tree, it calls to mind something in your mind,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
If you didn't speak English, it's just a sound, right?
Yeah. Right.
This idea that language is incredibly important in how it becomes possible to have an experience of yourself. It's the stories you're telling yourself, but it's also the way it's coming from outside, that these things that we think are so intimate to ourselves, which is one of the things that's great about writing a memoir is like it's supposed to be like dumping out the stuff that's so intimate to yourself, but you have to have craft, right?
Yeah.
You have to use words. It's mediated. It's controlled by the genres of self-expression that will allow what you say to be recognizable to others, right?
Mm.
All of this stuff about language is so deeply seated within the way we think about what it is to be a human being.
Right.
And it's not surprising that many cultures around the world, it's like, it's not just long traditions of Western philosophy, like going back to the Greeks, right? It's like man is the talking animal, man is the rational animal.
Right.
It's like in a lot of places to become a human is to become a speaker, right?
So then what happens when language is taken away or doesn't exist?
Well, there's actually a bunch of things prior to agreeing upon a convention that are happening all the time. And that's
Yeah.
actually, that chapter, it's critiquing myself. It's not necessarily like I'm turning away from everything I learned, because I think that was part of what I was learning from Jim, that there is something outside of language. It's hard to use language to talk about it. I think my book is a long effort to use language to talk about it. So it's like, in that sense, I'm kind of leaving it behind. But it's like, first of all, the idea that there is another in front of you, right? The possibility that you could even share an experience with someone else. Like, how does that become possible? And
Hmm.
what are all of the embodied ways in which it becomes possible to share experience prior to actually using words?
Yeah.
I just think that's really interesting, and I think it's also just really important because on the one hand, it seems really innocent. Oh, yeah, of course, humans use language. At the same time, it's been used as a way of excluding people from, the basic, privileges and duties that come with being a member of the species, right? It's like, and
Yeah.
this is the dark history of anthropology. Anthropology, what makes us human? Well, a lot of time was spent by early anthropologists, looking at certain people and saying, no, those guys are not human. You know, they're
Right.
not, right? Or all of our political systems. You look at the people who created democracy totally worth defending in these times. But if you look back at these 18th century thinkers, it was like, yeah, rational, critical debate. And they meant like getting the men together in their coffee houses, smoking their cigars. It's like the people who are capable of talking rationally didn't include women, didn't include Black people, didn't include Indigenous people,
That's right.
and really didn't include disabled people. So, yeah, so there's that whole side of like language. I guess the other thing I'd say that isn't in the book is, and I'm kind of, jumping around a little bit, but someone whose work I really love is the historian Dagmar Herzog, who writes about Germany. And she has a few really beautiful recent books out. One of them is called The Question of Unworthy Life, and it's about the euthanasia killings in Germany. It's like people don't necessarily widely know this, but the T4 program, which basically killed people like my daughter, that was where they really got those gas chambers warmed up, right? They used
Mhm.
gas chambers on disabled people first. And then they
Right.
use them on millions and millions and millions of Jewish people, right?
Right.
And the kind of logic that justified that was based in very much shared sorts of ways of thinking, talking, doing things in the United States, England, throughout Europe. Another recent book Steve Unwin has written called Beautiful Lives. And he's a theater director, literary scholar, like Virginia Woolf. Yeah, these
Yeah.
people, we should just kill them. I mean, it was very, very common for people to think that people who are not kind of like up to the mark of what a, well-engineered human being should look like, someone who could
Right.
really contribute to society, we should just get rid of them. It's a way of saving money, etc., right? And
Right.
anthropology was part of that story. I mean, in America, we American anthropologists there's a long history of like pat ourselves on the back. We had Franz Boas who like did studies to refute the eugenicists and the race scientists. And one of the things that came out of this is this idea of the psychic unity of mankind that, people may vary across the globe in terms of their physical appearance, but we all have the same brain, right? And
Yeah.
I think that created some problems, right? And you even see it in popular writings about eugenics in the US, where, there's a lovely book that's, on Carrie Buck, this woman who was sterilized with the approval of the Supreme Court. And the whole point of the book is to show that, oh, Carrie Buck was really of normal intelligence. She didn't deserve to be sterilized, which is assuming that people who were not deserved it,
Deserved it.
right? So
Yeah.
I think that anthropology needs to be able to grapple with these forms of difference that we've kind of like, oh, those things don't exist, right? Again,
Hmm.
you look at civil rights battles, et cetera, it's always like, we are capable, we pass the litmus test. Whereas really what makes us human is that we're social, right? We're
Hmm.
social, which means you can't like look at an individual human, like pluck any of us out of our social context, and we're completely non-functional, right? What makes us human is that we have a world that can support people like my daughter, right? My
Yeah.
daughter's like one of the
Yeah.
most human people out there, if that's the way you're thinking about what humanity is. So just really
Sure.
moving away from these ways of thinking about capacity, which I think for very good reasons, anthropologists embraced, but this is a really good moment to think about, what quagmires have we stepped into by kind of
Yeah.
playing that game?
What if we're human simply because we're here?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Oh gosh, Danilyn, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I
Yeah.
know that I kind of booked an hour of you. But
Okay.
this was a mic drop moment for me in your book, so I want to
Yeah.
read your words to you. You wrote, "Capitalism does such a poor job of valuing the work that really matters. Neoliberalism has ripped huge holes in the safety net and impoverished programs that remain. The savagery of the immigration system feeds the gig economy. Corporations profit from their employees' vulnerability. It's what keeps people on the job. Sexism mistakes labor for destiny and skill for instinct. Racism is the linchpin that holds the entire structure in place. Soon our computers will be writing our novels. They're already driving our cars. At least for now, care for my daughter and others like her is something only living, breathing humans can do." I do feel like your book also at its core is advocacy. And right
Yeah.
now we're in a very dark time. We have a president who just used the R word last week as an insult.
I miss that, but there's so much to choose from.
There's
You
so
know?
much to choose from. Exactly. Talk to me about your fight for our society to value
Yeah.
lives like your daughters and also support lives like your daughters.
Well, part of the fight is to support the lives of the people who care for her.
Yeah.
And that's actually what I feel the most sort of fired up about because Millie's life is pretty wonderful right now. She's got a mom with a great job. We live in a great house. It's a great community, great caregivers. I have the resources. Like I said, we live like church mice. We save money. Craig took out an extra $1 million in life insurance. I've lived pretty frugally. We're
Yeah.
going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people like Millie are not going to be okay. And the people who care for her, who maybe have loved ones like Millie, are not going to be okay. I just feel like, I mean, like I said about publicity, it's kind of like, ooh, it's a little bit icky. Writing something this personal as an anthropologist, again, given the whiff of exploitation around the way we engage in our relationships, I mean, you got to be honest about it. It's like, Millie didn't ask me to write this book, and the book
Sure.
is not, I mean, it's about her, but it can't be about her. It's about her impact on me and people around her.
Yeah.
The one way I can live with this is just like, how do I kind of turn this into a message that maybe people will hear? So there are some very, very specific things that are going on right now. Immigration, the deportations of people, including people with green cards, people with permission to be here, people who are citizens, but people who are non-citizens, right? I mean, let's remember, why is it that people are here? It has to do with
Right.
US foreign policy over generations,
Hmm.
right? It has to do with climate change, which people in the United States are more responsible for than anyone else, right? It has to do with parts of the world not becoming livable. It has to do with these forever wars we seem to keep starting. right?
Yeah.
And it has to do with the fact that, and I always like hate this kind of excuse, but you know, there is this thing. It's like, yeah, people don't want to do that kind of work, right? Because it's deeply devalued. And that's sort of like the racism that feeds into this, the sexism that feeds into this. Heaven forbid I should have to do that kind of work, right?
Yeah.
So really, our care system is really dependent on opening borders, not closing them.
Right.
Our population is aging worldwide. There are going to be more and more people who, if not exactly like Millie, are in the same camp who need people to care for them.
Yeah.
And like, what the hell are we doing keeping people out? It's crazy. And it also is just like a devaluation of things that are like the best in our species. There are lots of things in our species that are not admirable,
Right.
but our ability to reach across boundaries and touch one another and make each other's welfare our business, you know, and just have the imagination to imagine what it is to be someone who's not yourself. It's like these are really important muscles for the species to continue to exercise. And
Yeah.
it just really bothers me that this is the case. So long-winded, the immigration things, and then the cuts to Medicaid. You know, and if you talk to, you know, people, you know, who are supporters of the administration, and, you know, and you have from time to time, right? It's like, yeah, but we're not talking about your daughter, you know, because then, I mean, unless they're like Trump, right? Unless
Yeah.
they're just like
Right.
openly eugenicist, you know, they might be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I have a friend who has someone like your daughter. It's like, no, of course not the really truly needy, you know? The
Right.
tyranny cases, but they don't understand that this is a system, right? It's a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And when you go after her caregivers, you're going after her.
Right.
And when you fight fraud, you put up bureaucratic roadblocks to her and to people like her. You create long waiting lists to get services. You create situations like in the LA fires where the father and the son had cerebral palsy. The
It
father
was
was an
hard.
amputee and wheelchair user. It's like, why the hell were those people alone in that house? It's because the state was not providing them
Yeah.
with support for the care that would have protected them and saved their lives, right? So it's
Yeah.
all of these things are really worth getting up in arms about. I mean, it was
Yep.
bad enough in normal times. It's just like I really feel like we need to fight this. And
Yeah.
again, I'm talking too much, so you can cut me off. But you know, I've
No.
been on the radio a couple times. I was on 1-8 twice. I was like super grateful for that. The first time I didn't get the questions ahead of time. So it was a little bit like being dropped on a stage with a bunch of professional ballet dancers and trying to keep up with them. But you know, they were like, "Oh, we want to talk about how hard it is being Millie's caregiver," and then the second was, "We want to talk about the financial burden of being Millie's caregiver." It's like, my life is beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I don't think taking care of Millie is not my hardship. It's like
Right.
living in a world that hates people like her and hates the people who her life depends on is the hardship. You know, it's like
Yeah.
that's what I want to talk about. And I'm
Yeah.
just happy that this book gives me a chance to explain something about how this life that people think would be a nightmare is actually not,
Yeah.
right? I'm happy to have that opportunity, but also to have this opportunity to just like say, and here are the conditions that make this possible, and here's
Right.
why they're impossible to achieve for a lot of people, and here's why they're incredibly fragile and now directly under threat.
And I think that's exactly what you do. You have all of your readers reflect on what communication is, what we're placing value on, money versus human life, human happiness. And I completely agree with all the points that you made. And I really want to emphasize, I mean, when people read a memoir like yours and they're like, that's not my experience, so I don't have to worry about it. But at
Yeah,
any point in our lives, we can become disabled,
right.
accidents, disease. And also, as you said, with an aging population, you will need a caregiver at certain point in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like you can't escape this
yeah,
system that a lot of people are trying to break down.
absolutely.
And it is
Yeah,
worth the fight. I completely agree. Completely
yeah,
agree. So if you have any organizations that you love, you know, if there's someone like me where it's like, I don't really know how to help besides
yeah.
vote, obviously, a certain way.
I mean, I will like, give one shout out. There are lots, but communication first.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Great. And
And
we'll
I will
link
give
that
you the link.
information in the show
Yeah,
notes. Yes, we
yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, Danilyn, let's wrap this up. This is the question that I ask all of my authors. How do you stay hopeful today?
No, like I said, it's one of life's like, you know, really bad jokes that you actually will get old. You know, so I'm kind of tempted, like, young people give me hope. But what really gives me hope is like at least once a week, I walk down to Seabright Beach and I
Mm.
throw myself into the ocean. I don't stay long, but I just get cold waves and
Woo!
I come out and I lie in the sun, and that gives me hope.
I love that. Good for you. I've tried cold plunging. My husband was really into it for a while. Not my jam, but go on with your bad self, Danilyn.
No, not my partner's jam either, but there you go.
Thank you so much for joining me
You're
today.
welcome.
Like your memoir, our conversation was insightful, educational, and lovely.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing your and Millie's stories. They're more important now than ever, like you said. I just
yeah.
feel so grateful to be a part of the amplification process of your memoir, Beautiful Mystery.
Oh, thank you, Alex. It's been really fun to talk to you, and I'm really honored to have this platform.
Oh, well,
So
thank you so much.
keep doing what you do.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah,
Okay, well, have a
yeah.
wonderful day.
All right. Take
Thank you.
care.
Take
Thanks
care.
again. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
And thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation, I would really appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and rate and review the show wherever you listen to Babes in Bookland. Next week, we're back with our bonus episode. My friends Jackie and Danielle from the No More Late Fees podcast join me to chat about The Holiday, the classic rom-com that feels so cozy this time of year. And then our last episode of the year is on Katherine Johnson's memoir, My Remarkable Journey. My friend Kate joins me, and it's a truly joyful episode, and I can't wait to bring it your way. Until then, take care. Be well.